when you watch television nowadays, do you think that the transgender community is represented well, or too much, or not enough, or is it ridiculous, or is it just right?
Okay, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but
Cool.
like the okay, first and foremost, trans representation in television for the most part is pretty terrible, right? Especially if you watch old shows like I do. I really love old shows. Because I like there's like six TV shows that I watch over and over again. Um, but like for the most part, it's terrible, right? But there are two shows that I think have done the best when it comes to like representation of trans folks in particular. Now, to be clear, I'm not somebody that watches a lot of different television. I watch a lot of the same television over and over again. Um, but the two shows are Bob's Burgers actually, and believe it or not, the few episodes with the trans character in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like despite the fact that all of the characters in It's Always Sunny are like terrible, terrible people, um, like when they had a trans character on the show for a couple of episodes, um, like the character was played by a cis woman, which is like, a whole conversation, but a trans character, a trans woman in particular, being played by a cis woman is a lot better than being played by like a cis man, like to be clear. But she was the normal one, right? They were all weird and cringe, and she was just living a normal life. And so with that, I think the representation was like pretty good. And when it comes to her character, um, she was obviously the hero, and the It's Always Sunny gang, they were being terrible and transphobic, but their transphobia was very much painted as an explicitly bad thing. It was proof that they continued to be the terrible people that they are. Um, and so that one I think was good. Bob's Burgers is really interesting because there's a couple of trans characters that were originally introduced as sex workers, right? Which is not great, right? There's a lot of TV that likes to represent trans women exclusively as sex workers. Um, and so, but like in like later episodes and later seasons, there's, a couple of trans characters that just show up and they're just a normal part of the show, right? They're just living their best life. There was like a whole discourse about, one of the trans characters being voiced by a cisgender man, which, I really have mixed feelings about that. I really have mixed feelings about that because I don't always modulate my voice. Um, I mean, in fact, sometimes in a lot of my videos, I sound like this, right? And so I think there's value in normalizing trans women not modulating their voices, right? Because it's a lot of work. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody can get like voice therapy like I can from the VA. But like I think there's value in that type of representation, but that's like its own sort of discourse. But ultimately, they're a normal character. They're living their life. And that really is like, I mean, really what trans people are asking for when it comes to representation on television is like, being trans is entirely coincidental to who they are as a person.
Now that you mentioned that, like I was watching for a random reason Ally McBeal. Like again, because I just popped up on Hulu and I used to watch it years ago and I was like, oh, let's see what this is about. And I happened to stumble across an episode with a trans woman, and of course they had her as a sex worker and all of that. But I was like, I didn't even know that Ally McBeal had an episode. But it was like very clear that like that would not fly today. Like their very like sloppy, confused attempt to like deal with, to deal with this was kind of comical, I guess, because it was, forever ago. But yeah, I mean, in that regard, it seems like the needle is moving a bit, but a long way to go.
It's really wonderful to see that happen because I grew up not being able to identify with a character unless they were a heterosexual male. Like I had a hard time playing the game Tomb Raider because of that, because that's how I grew up. It was just how I grew up. I didn't like it, but that's how I felt. I didn't relate. There's a game called Rust, and you're not able to select your gender or how you look. So you could be anything, and you're stuck with that character forever. It's attached to your Steam ID. And that was a problem for me until a lot of things helped me normalize it more. And I'm saying this and not I probably sound like a terrible person, but like I had to have those things changed in my life to normalize it in a separate direction because of the way I was brought up. And I'm much more I don't know if accepting is the right word. It's just more now. I don't even think about it anymore, really. It's fascinating how much I don't think about it actually.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. But like that's the thing. Like a lot of people see themselves in different characters, right? And a lot of people should be able to see themselves in different characters. And that's really like the reality where, you know, um, like obviously some people don't care as much and they don't care about, representation in like different ways. Um, but a lot of people do care and it does matter because ultimately, when you have representation in media, like for example, like, if you got like to roll back the clock a little bit to like, shows from like the 80s and 90s where it's like a big deal if there was like, a female character that was a doctor or a black character that was a doctor, right? Like that right there sends a message to people, especially young people who are like watching those shows that like, hey, a black doctor, perfectly normal, woman doctor, perfectly normal. And now we're, at the point where all that's normalized in our society. I mean, there are still a lot of people that are really sexist and racist towards their doctors. It's not completely gone away. But for the most part, in polite company, nobody's going to be shocked if you're a woman and you say that you're a doctor. Um, you know, and so when it comes to having like different characters who are like trans, who are represented, um, a lot of people are raised by television, and a lot of people, their sense of community and their sense of the world comes from television. And so it makes sense that in like video games and movies, having that representation matters. And I don't think you're canceled for, identifying mostly with the cis male characters because, you know, to some degree, right? Like the phrase, like, all the world is a stage is in some sense true. And as we sort of find ourselves throughout our life, we do sort of look at different role models, whether they be real life people in our lives or television characters, and sort of craft ourselves in the image of the people that we most admire.